Sharpening landscape photographs is something of a dark art. If you do it right, it can transform a photograph from good to great. But if you get it wrong, your photo can end up looking like a Victorian etching. There is, however, an easily learned system that will enable you to bring out the hidden detail in your photograph while still keeping it looking natural. In this video, I will break down how to use the sharpening, texture, clarity, and dehaze tools to make your photograph look better without the need for any specialized AI tools. For the purposes of this video, I am going to be using Adobe Lightroom Classic, but the techniques we're discussing are broadly applicable to any good RAW editor. Something like Capture One or DxO Photo Lab will do the job admirably as well. It's also worth saying at the beginning that there isn't going to be any dramatic reveal, because when you do it right, sharpening should be a subtle effect, not a dramatic one. Sharpening is, of course, also the last thing you do in that post-processing workflow. All right, enough preamble. Let's get into Lightroom and talk about these techniques. So here is the photo I'm going to be using for the purposes of this tutorial, little beach shot I took, and I've chosen it because it is a high frequency image. What do we mean by high frequency? Basically, it means that there is lots of changes across the image. Imagine there's a line right through the middle of this image, and imagine for a second there was just a white block and a black block. There would just be one change. That is low frequency. Because we've got lots going on, this is a high frequency image. It's true of most landscape photographs. So the key to sharpening correctly in landscape photography is to work with an inverted pyramid of detail. Sharpening is at the top because it is the smallest change we make to the image, and therefore we can apply the greatest amount, the most volume to it with the sharpening slider. And so because that's our first change, let's get straight into it. So I'm going to go into the detail tab here, and here is the sharpening slider. I'm going to bring that all the way up almost to the end. So in order to see what is going on, I can hold down the option key whilst moving the masking slider, and we can see where the sharpening is being applied. So if I go all the way to the left, everything's white, everything's being sharpened. At the extreme end, we've just got the kind of outline of the grass, and actually that's all we really want. You can see the clouds in the background there are being sharpened slightly, and I'm okay with that at this very basic level with most of the image sharpened. But remember, as a rule, clouds don't have sharp edges, and also because this is a soft focus background, you really don't want to go too crazy. So the masking slider is going to stay pretty much up here on the extreme right hand edge there. Now do remember to make full and complete use of the zoom function in your RAW editor, because you need to see what's going on. Now remember at the start when I said that the sharpening slider in the detail tab was affected the smallest elements of the image. Well, let's zoom in on some of those small elements with little tiny little hairy bits on the edge of this particular bit of grass, and we can do a little before and after to see what's going on. It's very subtle. This is what we want. But if you look, you can see it's slightly kind of out of focus with the effect off, and if I turn it up, you can see everything becomes much clearer, but we haven't gone crazy. Now we have got a couple of other sliders at our disposal here, the first of which is radius, and this controls the thickness of the edge, and we can have a little play with that to see if we can improve things without going too far. Keep your eyes on these grass fronds here, and I don't think that they are improving things much. Let's actually try the other way. Now I think the default setting was ideal there, just one on the radius slider, but do experiment with your photographs because obviously these settings are going to be different for every image. The detail slider governs how much volume we apply to this sharpening, and it's very easy to push this too far. If I bring this up, you can see we're getting all this noise starting to appear inside the little grass from there. So I'm going to back that right off back to where it was, around about 24. And that's all you need to do in the sharpening tool. So let's move on to the other stages in that inverted pyramid. I'm going to come into the basic tab here in Lightroom, and we've got this presence section. And handily enough, and entirely by design, I reckon these are in the order you should apply them. They're in the order of intensity. We can apply a fair bit to the texture slider, and then a bit less to clarity, and then finally a very small amount to dehaze. So I'm going to zoom out of that part of the image, and I'm going to zoom into the center here because the texture slider affects those parts of the image that the human eye perceives as having texture, like the edges of grass or fabric or something like that. This central part of this bit of June grass is exactly the kind of area that it's going to affect. Let's bring the slider up. I'm zoomed into 300%. And what we'll do is take it up, and we'll go all the way up to show you what it looks like. And actually, it hasn't overdone it too much. If we zoom out, though, we can see it's kind of gone too far on these grass fronds here. We need to back that right off. You've got to find the point at which it's having an effect, but it's not going too far. So you have to rock the slider backwards and forwards. I'm thinking that looks pretty good. Let's just check this bit of grass here. Yep. Absolutely spot on. 62 is the magic number for the texture slider. Moving down our inverted pyramid, we come to the clarity slider. The clarity slider affects edge contrast, and it does that by lighting up one side of any edges and darkening the other. And if you go too far, you're going to get that kind of etch looking that I talked about in the intro. While we're zoomed out here, let me bring the clarity up and I'll show you what I mean. So here we go. We've gone too far. We've got some horrible sort of HDR looking display going on. So I'm going to bring that right back, and I'm going to do this zoomed out, and then I'm going to zoom in and check my results. So all I'm doing is waiting until I can see the change and then backing off slightly. So I'm bringing it up, and I'm watching this central area here where there's loads of little edges for me, and I reckon around about 33 is ideal there. Notice that we've got 62 on texture, but only 33 on clarity, that inverted pyramid. Let me zoom in and see. I'm just going to double check, liking that a lot. 33 is good. So up until now, most of these changes had been affecting the mid-tones in the image. But that last slider, the dehaze slider, that works in a completely different way to the sharpening, texture, and clarity sliders. The dehaze slider tries to counteract the effects of diminishing light caused by atmospheric effects, such as haze and mist and all that kind of stuff. It works in a completely different way, and it's the slider that it's easiest to go crazy with and completely ruin your image. So you have to use it very judiciously, very small amounts. There are also two side effects to using the dehaze slider, one of which it tends to add saturation, and it does. It adds quite a bit. So in a lot of instances, if you're using it, you should back off the saturation slightly. And also, it doesn't greatly affect the highlights. It affects everything towards the left of the histogram. And when I use it, if you watch the histogram up here, you'll see that in action. In fact, what I'll do is I'll crank this all the way to the right. Can you see all the most effect is happening over here on the left? There are some changes in the highlights there, but primarily it's on that left-hand side. And look what happens if I go too far with the old dehaze. It's not pleasant, is it? I'm not saying don't use it. It's a powerful tool. You've just got to be careful with it. Just use tiny amounts to keep the integrity of your image and keep it natural looking. So let's do what we've been doing, which is just teasing to that point where we notice it. We can see the changes, and then we back off slightly. I'm up about 5 here. I'm thinking 5's looking pretty good. 4 or 5. Don't need much at all. Let's zoom in and see. Can you see how it's darkening the center here? Because we got the left-hand side of the histogram being affected. This is another reason why you've got to be careful. I'm saying 4 or 5 is absolutely all we need there. So there you go, guys. If we look at the detail slider, we've got that all the way up on the right here. And these are the other detail tools we have in Lightroom. And we've got a diminishing volume going on here. Fair bit in texture, half again in clarity, and only a small amount in dehaze. Over my years editing photographs with Lightroom, I have found that this is a good working technique. It's a good rule of thumb, you know. If you've finished editing your photograph and you're applying sharpening to it, have a look at the sliders, and usually they should be in this sort of orientation, you know, with a nice diminishing return. Now, I'm just going to make a couple of snapshots of this for you. So we'll do a after snapshot here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off. I can't do back off everything and reset the image because it will lose the highlights and the shadows. It won't be able to see anything. So what I'll do is I'll just reset these sliders and back that all the way off. And then we'll do another called before. So I said I wasn't going to do a dramatic reveal, and it really isn't going to be very dramatic, but we will zoom in. There's the before and here's after. If you look carefully, you can see some changes happening. But what we'll do is, so we'll zoom in on this area here. This is what the image looked like before with none of these sharpening techniques, and here is after. So we've added detail. We have not added noise. We haven't greatly affected the saturation because remember, sharpening comes at the end of the post-processing workflow. So we don't want to go messing up all the time and effort we've spent trying to get the colors right and as they were on the day we took the photo. So let's just have a look at it zoomed down. Keep your eyes peeled on the screen. There's before and there's after. Looking pretty sweet, I reckon. Now, before we wrap it up, I would just like to point out that it's always best to apply things like sharpening using a region-based masking tool. So you just get that localized effect. Then you can tweak the image perfectly. I don't want the sky to be sharpened. Generally speaking, as a rule, you don't want to sharpen it. Sometimes maybe if there's lightning, you do it. You only want the kind of the detail, the foreground, the stuff you want the eyes to focus on to be sharpened. And so masking's very useful for that. And I encourage you to use it yourself when you're applying these techniques. And that'll do us for this video, guys. Hopefully you can apply the old inverted pyramid technique, rule of thumb to your photograph. So you've got your sharpening and your texture, your clarity, and last and very least, dehaze. If you've got value from this content, please do give it a like. It really helps with the old YouTube algorithms, and consider subscribing to my channel for more photo, drone, and video related content. Till the next time, guys. Ta-ta.